rather nice. What I thought we would do today is talk a little bit about some of the ways we survey for wildlife. We look for things here when we can't always be here to be actively looking ourselves. It's also an excuse to have a walk around the wood and look with the purpose, theoretically, of looking at a couple of devices, but really it's just an excuse to have a wander around the wood and have a look at what we see as we're going. And I'll point out a few of the things we use to allow us to do a bit of survey work when we are not here. So I'm going to turn the camera around so we're looking into the wood and we'll go for a bit of a walk. Hello Fiona, you'll know all this. Anyway, we're just having a quick wander through the wood from Central Clearing, which is sort of in the centre of the wood, as the name would suggest, and have a quick talk about some of the ways we look for wildlife when we can't be here. And that was obviously quite important last year because the ability of some of our people to get here and do surveys was restricted, but we were able to keep an eye on a few things using various devices, and we'll have a look at some of them as we go. So just before we get to any interesting devices, let's have a look at some of the bluebells, because that's one of the things this wood is noted for, are the large array of bluebells that grow all over the woodland. Which are starting to come out now and starting to be rather pretty, and over the next week or so they'll come out in full. So we'll stop here and have a quick look at one of the devices we use, fairly obvious device really. But what we've got here is one of our trail cameras. It's set up what you might be able to see on the path. It's not that easy to make out. I'll hold the camera up a bit as you can. There is a bit of a track cut through here where one of our foxes, we suspect, makes its regular patrols through. So we put a camera up pointed at that, and that will allow us to see if I'm right that it's a fox creating this, see what's going on, capture some wildlife without me being here and without me causing disturbance. So what I'll do is very quickly take the camera off. And we'll just see if it's behaving itself. The batteries may have gone. That is one of the challenges with these things. Hello Ash. We're just having a look at various remote monitoring devices that we use here to keep an eye on the reserve when not around. There we go, it's waking up now. So this is one of our trail cameras which I've got up over where we think a fox is going through, and hopefully it will now behave. Don't know who these Swan people are, but they seem to make the videos on nearly all the trail cameras I buy. And we can quickly go through pictures of me. So you could quickly flick through the pictures on the screen and see if we can find anything. You get a lot of false positives for this. Images where it's been triggered but there's nothing obviously there. But there's something. There was a fox going through at night. I'll turn this off now because... how many do I use on the reserve, Ash? Well, I've currently got 2 that I'm using, and one of my colleagues has got 4 or 5 out. So we've got a fair degree of coverage. It's quite interesting to try and reattach this thing one-handed when holding this device. But there we go. So that allows us to keep an idea of what's going on here when we're not here. Quite a useful technique, quite helpful. I will head back out. So the wood's looking much prettier now. I was going to say, if people want to visit Perivale Wood, it's not routinely open to the public, members of the Selborne Society who run the organisation, who run the wood and look after the place, are entitled, well, are able to visit free of charge. And in normal circumstances, we've managed that through a system of keys being available to borrow. Yes, it's a beautiful day now. Ash, it was cold earlier. We had snow at about 10 o'clock this morning, which was a bit surprising. It's still not as warm as it has been. So insect activity is a bit suppressed by the low weather. Anyway, what was I say? Yes, if people want to visit the place, if you join the Selborne Society, then lots of opportunities. But for the general public, we have traditionally had one open day a year where people have been allowed to come and see the reserve. This year, we can't really cope with that volume of visitors, given the restrictions still in effect. So we're running a series of 4 open days over the next couple of weeks. And if people are interested in that, if you look up the Selborne Society online, you can find out how you can get a ticket, book up. Sadly, it's got to be a bit organised and a bit controlling this year. But book up and come along and see this reserve and see all the beautiful things down here in northwest London, for anyone who's interested, because obviously this broadcast goes all over the world. Well, this is one of the edges of the reserve. Some nice banks of flowers with lesser celandine and bluebells and greater stitchwort and a few other flowers in there. I did a broadcast earlier in the Easter weekend when we were looking for insects out here. We found a few things. I've spent a chunk of today working through the specimens of some of the bees and hoverflies that I captured, trying to see if I can work out what they are, trying to work out how you go about mounting specimens. I hear a cute little bee fly. Let's see if we can get a cute bee fly. Everybody likes bee flies, so just to the right of my shadow, let me zoom in. Where is it? I can't see it on camera. Well, there was a bee fly there. There is a bee fly there. Let me zoom out and find it again. So, there it is. So there we go, sitting on that bramble leaf is Bombylius major, bee fly fox this weekend. Yes, they're rather cute insects, like a fluffy flying narwhal, I think somebody described them as, which I think should be their official name now instead of bee fly. Fluffy flying narwhals, because of that long proboscis out the front. And anyone who's in the UK, if you see one of those insects, a bee fly, if you go online and look up bee fly watch, there's somewhere you can report the sightings, and dipterists who study these flies will be really interested to know where they're being seen around the country, when they're being seen, and they're a nice, easy enough insect to identify. As you can see from that one, they often sit still for a good period of time, which again is really helpful because you can get a photograph of them if you're not absolutely sure what you've seen. They're relatively photogenic. It's not often the way with an insect. Key thing for photographing an insect, I would say, try not to let your shadow fall across it. Often they'll fly away as soon as you shade them if they're out in the sun. So if you can manage to get a picture as well, I'm sure the bee fly watch people will be very happy to find out about that. Do I get dotted bee fly here? Not knowingly. We may well have, there are other bee fly species than the one we were seeing there, which was the dark bordered bee fly. Although it just gets called the bee fly normally. And there are other species of bee fly that are somewhat less common. I've not knowingly seen any of the others here, which is not the same as saying they're not here. Or if someone who is more mentally attuned to diptera to flies than I am were to be here, that we wouldn't get those. So there's one more trail camera here which I'll just mention. This one's actually not doing what the subject of this broadcast is. So the one over here, which is on this tree, isn't really directly monitoring wildlife. It's not monitoring wildlife in the sense of being triggered by things going through. The point of this trail camera for the next month or two is that it's basically taking a shot every 50 minutes of the view out here, just of an area of our meadow, of our woodland floor. So it started taking this, but none of these bluebell leaves were even showing, none of the flowers. And I'll keep this going through the next couple of months, and we'll get a nice cycle of how the plants come up, grow up, and then drop back down, and when they've finished their flowering. So it's a different way of monitoring the wildlife, and it's a way of giving you a view that you don't get. It's a way of giving you sort of a long view over several months, stitched together as a video, which will eventually go on my YouTube channel. So that's another of the ways that we're, again, getting an insight into the reserve when we're not here. I'd like to just sit here for 4 months and do nothing else, have someone bring me my food and just sit here and look at the place. But I can't do that, so the second best thing is to put out cameras and do that sort of long time-lapse recording. I checked that camera earlier, which is why I didn't open it today on screen to check the batteries and so on. I checked it this morning. So the next device I'm going to look at is a new device to me. It's been its first deployment today, or last night. So I will go and show people that. And explain what it does, and explain what I'm going to be doing next. So we're coming past here. We'll not go and have a look at this today, but this used to be our old toilet block. We've modernised that, so it's not a toilet anymore. So this is the cupboard, the shed I now use to rear insects in. We'll look at them on another broadcast on another day. But what we've got here, perched on the top of this post, is a slightly oddly named device called an audio moth. Not quite sure why moth, there's nothing insect related to it. But what this device is a remote audio recording device. Let's quickly open it up and show you it. We're not going to do anything particularly cool with this here because it's all it is a device. Excuse me. But what it is inside the box there is a little clever piece of electronics with a microphone, some batteries, with a memory card somewhere in there, I hope. Oh yes, memory card on the top there. And what this is, you do is you program this to essentially listen out for whatever's about. Bird song, particularly. It can do bats. It can do orthoptera later in the year as well. So this is giving us a chance to sort of hear what's going on when we're not. What I'm going to do is go home this evening and put this, I'll just turn it off, put this into another, take the memory card out and learn from that what was calling last night in the reserve. So that's another of the remote monitoring methods. It's used a lot for birds, that approach, under the term nocturnal migration or knock-migging. And it can give you quite an interesting insight into what's flying over the reserve at night that we just wouldn't know about. So I'm going to have a good play with that and to try and teach myself over the course of this year how to use the files that produces, how to load them into a computer program, how to interpret the sonograms and the spectrograms and all of the pictures, as well as listen to them. And with any luck, that will give us a really useful new insight into some of the things that are here, some of the birds that we haven't passing over this reserve, and other places I'm going to use it that we don't. I'll also use it as a bat monitoring device to keep an eye on, to keep listening out for bats, see what bats we've got, and hopefully use it as well for the various orthopteran surveys. See if I can find some good literature on interpreting orthoptera calls. And here is our team of stalwart volunteers who've been opening the reserve up for people today, just heading off home. So the last device we'll have a look at, this one isn't actually in use at the moment. I just thought we'd end having a look at one of the remote monitoring techniques we use. Is this giant green Toblerone. Let me have a look. There we go. A giant green Toblerone. And this is used to monitor for mammals. It's a footprint trap. Doesn't trap the animal and doesn't keep the animal at all. But what you have is essentially a tunnel you put down somewhere where there's perhaps tracks or where there's signs that smaller mammals, things like hedgehogs, shrews, mice, things like that, you think they might be going through. You put this tunnel down, you maybe put some bait inside, but critically what you do is you put down inside sheets of white paper on one part and some dark ink or sticky something that will stick to their feet. Again, doesn't harm them, it just blows up. And then when they walk over the white paper, they leave footprints. This one hasn't been in use, which is why there's nothing really to look at, but I just thought it would be a different method. And again, it's a passive way of surveying what's there. You can put this out, you can come back, you can look at the shapes of the footprints, work out what species you might have seen. So that's 3 of the ways we monitor for wildlife when we're not here at Perivale Wood. Lots of other ways we monitor wildlife when we are here, and I'll continue doing these broadcasts through the year from here and from other places, looking at various things. So I think we'll end just looking up the meadow. We'll end on that shot there. Hope you found that interesting, and I'm sure we'll speak again.